You are listening to the Air Raid Hour with host Judge Mathis, dog, Tilt Money, dog, presented by the fine folks over at the Cover One Sports Network, dogs. Bills Mafia, let's go!
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this pre-recorded version of the Air Raid Hour Buffalo Bills pregame show. My name is Steve Mathis. You can find me on Twitter at Judge Mathis. Joined as always by my co-host Dave Tilton. You can find him on Twitter at Tilt Money. Together we are the Bills Guys. You can find us on Twitter at the Bills Guys. Presented as always by the Cover One Sports Network and Picasso's Pizza. So doing things a little bit differently today here on the pregame, pre-recorded. So obviously leave your comments and feel free to have a conversation in the live stream. But when we are not putting your comments up on the screen or acknowledging your comments, no, it's not because we are jerks. It is because this is this pre-recorded as we both have some family engagements on Thursday morning or this morning for people who are watching this. But Dave, Bills at Lions, Thanksgiving 12:30 kickoff on CBS, which means we get Jim Nantz, Tony Romo. The 7-3 Bills face off against the 4-6 Lions. On paper, the Bills should win this game. But the Bills are dealing with a ton of key injuries. It's a short week, and the Lions, coached by the scrappy Dan Campbell, are riding a 3-game winning streak. The Bills do have 3 straight AFC East games after this. Could this be a trap game for the Buffalo Bills here on Thanksgiving?
I think the Bills are past the point of like having trap games. I think the times they've lost, it's just like honestly been it hasn't. I'll say this: the times they lost, it hasn't been because they overlooked the opponent. I don't even think with the Jets loss, it was because they were overlooking the Jets. I think the Bills, just didn't play a great game that day. I'm not sure about the defensive game plan. Obviously, Josh Allen with the turnovers, but ultimately, I don't see it as a trap game. I actually, when I was like kind of prepping for this show, I was looking at the lines and I'm like, this seems like a kind of a similar setup to the Browns in a way, like some of the statistics and some of the advanced analytics around DVOA and things like that. Like the Lions and Browns are kind of similar. But obviously this is a true home game for the Lions and it is a short week for the Bills. And the Fighting Dan Campbells have been playing pretty well lately. Doesn't look like Jameson Williams is going to be back for this week, although they have brought him back to practice. But yeah, the Bills can't overlook the Lions. I know these 3 AFC East games are on the horizon, but we just saw the Lions go in to MetLife and beat the Giants. So I mean, the Bills definitely can't take this team lightly.
Looking at injuries, this is typically the time where we would be discussing the inactive list, but unfortunately, we do not have those handy as we are not mind readers, but we can definitely take a look at 2 days worth of the injury reports. And this is really the only full day of practice for both the Bills and the Lions. So it's pretty telling if a guy is DNP today, whether they will be playing on Thursday or not, especially with it being a short week. So for the Buffalo Bills, already Sean McDermott has said it's very unlikely that Tremaine Edmonds or AJ Epinesa will be able to play on Thursday. Gregory Rousseau, in my opinion, is probably also unlikely with a DNP. And then there's the maybe with Mitch Morse, because now he's dealing with, on top of the elbow, he's dealing with an ankle. He was DNP in practice today, but he did finish the game on Sunday. We saw the way this team fell apart the last time we didn't have Mitch Morse. In reality, you think they would give him like a week to get ready for New England, but also he's kind of just like really important to how this offensive line gels. So I'm willing to say that Mitch Morse might be a true game time decision of all of these guys. And I think that there might be a decent likelihood he can go, even though we can talk about if he doesn't go. And if he doesn't go, what do you think the Buffalo Bills do at center? Is it Ryan Bates or is it Greg Van Roten? They just cut Greg Manx, who got picked up by the Browns. So really it's Bates or Van Roten.
Well, I mean, the Van Roten experiment didn't work exactly well against the Dolphins earlier this year. So I'm wondering if the Bills will be willing to mix it up a bit and shuffle the offensive line a bit. There's two schools of thought here, right? One is You just plug Van Roten in there, and then the rest of your O-line stays intact. You don't have to
Mhm.
shuffle. Doing that, does that get you your best 5 guys on the field? I'm not so sure.
Yep.
So do you slide Ryan Bates over to center, have David Questenberry, who I believe was a full practice participant today? This is Tuesday day. He was a full participant, so he should be playing. And do you put him at right guard and have Spencer Brown at right tackle? Like, to me, that's your best 5, but it also means you're shuffling 2 spots. So it's like, you kind of have to weigh that. Like, for me, I prefer Bates, to give Bates the shot at
Yeah.
center and have Questenberry at right guard, because I think that is your best combination. But it's going to be really up to whether the Bills feel like shuffling 2 spots or just 1 is going to have that much of a detriment on the overall performance.
Yeah, and one indicator, if Mitch Morse does not play too, John Scott posted a video today. Really, all the beat reporters posted a video today of Josh Allen practicing without any armband or sleeve on. So that's good to see with Josh Allen. But John Scott's video also showed him throwing a couple of passes. And who was the person snapping him the ball in practice? It was Ryan Bates. So that might be an indicator of where the Bills' minds are at. And it also might be an indicator, too, that, like, if you're confident Mitch Morse is going to play, or even semi-confident, you're probably putting Greg Van Roten as your starting center in practice to give Bates the right guard reps. So maybe that is an indicator that the Buffalo Bills aren't confident that Mitch Morse can go, but we will see what happens on Thursday morning. Crossing my fingers. I think of all the players who are questionable or will be listed as questionable tomorrow, he might be the closest one to having an ability to play. Middle linebacker is interesting. Tyrell Dodson, we're now 2 weeks back with AJ Klein returning. Sean McDermott pretty much gave sort of like a ho-hum response, like he's still getting back into it. He's still getting acclimated, but he did mention that Klein has been with him now for 2 stops, Carolina and Buffalo. Now he's back again here in Buffalo for a second stint. Tyrell Dodson last week, according to PFF, 7 times he was targeted. Of those 7 times he was targeted, it was for 5 receptions, 68 yards, and 67 of those yards were yards after the catch. So we talked about it on the post-game show on Monday, and now we have the analytical data to back it up. The Cleveland Browns literally were attacking Tyrell Dodson and having a decent amount of success. Do we see at middle linebacker a shift after now 2 weeks to AJ Klein? Do we see him active this week? Do we see a platoon? Do you think we see AJ Klein at all, or do you think the Bills stick with Tyrell Dodson?
Man, he got 100% of the snaps in the game against the Browns, Dodson, that is. And, there was maybe some, we debated a little bit in the pregame, like maybe Valen Spector gets some run, and like Dodson literally got 100% of the snaps. So if I'm betting right now, I'm still saying Dodson's probably getting most of the snaps. Do I want that to be the case? I mean, I don't know, right? Like, are we going to get the same AJ Klein that we got, last year when he was with the team? Are we going to get a guy that's been cut by not a very good football team? Like, so it's like, if he was worth anything, at least to that team, like, why would they cut him? Like, I get it. Every team's different, but like, I don't know. I still would probably lean that Dodson's going to get the first crack at it, but it doesn't mean that AJ Klein will be inactive for this game. I think he might be active for the game.
The last one here for the Bills injuries it's kind of a fun one. It's not really when you think about it, because AJ Epinesa and Gregory Rousseau are likely out, but that leaves 3 defensive ends for the Buffalo Bills, and that's not likely something that they're going to carry into game day, which means you could see a practice squad activation for either Mike Love or Kingsley Jonathan. Mike Love is a guy that we've always loved on this program and talked about how when he has played both in the preseason and the regular season, he's always sort of risen to the occasion and sort of blended in, and like, he hasn't been great, but he's looked like an NFL player, a rotational NFL edge rusher when he's played. But you also have Kingsley Jonathan, who returns after being waived by the Chicago Bears and then clearing waivers. He had a huge preseason. And we talked about how, if he didn't clear waivers, maybe he would have usurped Mike Love and been the practice squad edge rusher and not Mike Love. But now we got both of them. We've got 2 defensive ends down. Do you think we see an activation? I mean, I do, but more specifically, once we do see an activation, is it Mike Love or is it Kingsley Jonathan?
knowing the Bills' history and knowing how they've handled situations like this, the odds would say it would be Mike Love, given his experience in the system, given he's been with the team the whole year. I think that you have to give the edge to Mike Love. I know that Kingsley Jonathan had a really solid preseason and obviously near and dear to many people's hearts, given the local connection, Syracuse connection there. But Mike Love's been with the squad the whole year, albeit on the practice squad. And I think that just because of that, even though Kingsley Jonathan was with the team through all of camp, the edge has got to go to Mike Love. And my heart would say whoever's the better run defender, that should be the guy that's active, because the Lions, now with DeAndre Swift back and Jamal Williams, have been able to run the ball quite well. But again, betting on the loyalty, I guess, and sort of the fact that the guys that have been there in the first instance, Dodson, now in the second instance, Love, I would say it's probably Mike Love.
Looking at the Lions injury report, they're pretty banged up as well, but they're going to get a couple of guys back. You mentioned Jamison Williams at the top. It's very, very unlikely he's going to play. Thank goodness, because he's a take the top off the defense kind of receiver. I'm glad his first game back isn't against the Buffalo Bills, but they're pretty banged up at receiver. Josh Reynolds missed last week, and DJ Chark was on a snap count last week. Both of them were limited in practice, that being Tuesday. So my guess is both DJ Chark and Josh Reynolds are back to go with Amon-Ra St. Brown, which is huge for the Lions. But I do think that both DJ Chark and Josh Reynolds will be limited. You might see those two platooning on the boundary with the likes of like Khalif Raymond and Tim Kennedy in the slot. So I do think you're going to see a heavy rotation of Lions receivers, and you're definitely not going to see DJ Chark and Josh Reynolds dealing with an ankle and a back injury, respectively, at full force. Frank Ragnow, their starting center, was a limited participant. I think he also goes, especially given the other two injuries. Non-participants today in Detroit's practice: right guard Evan Brown, left guard Jonah Jackson, which is huge for them. He was a monster last week. Like every week, whenever we play another team, I start to follow some of their beat guys and their film guys. They were just raving about the game that Jonah Jackson had against the New York Giants and how awesome he was, especially in getting that run game going. He's got a concussion. Evan Brown's dealing with a knee injury. So they're likely going to be down both of their starting guards for the Detroit Lions, which is huge for them. And then Jeffrey Okudah, their top corner, doubtful to play. And they're probably without two of their, rotational edge rushers, in Charles Harris, who's their starting left end, and Josh Pascal, who also sort of rotates in there. And he might actually be the listed starter, Pascal, that is, at right end. So a lot of injuries, especially on the lines for the Detroit Lions. What are your thoughts on some of the guys who are or will possibly be missing in action for the Detroit Lions on Thursday?
I mean, it's important. I will say it's nice that Jameson Williams is not going to be back, but DJ Chark, I think, is the type of receiver that can give the Bills problems.
Yep.
He is a good sort of point of contact, sort of, that type of receiver that the Bills have kind of struggled at the point of contact with the ball skills lately. So I do see a guy like DJ Chark possibly giving the Bills some trouble. Obviously, the line situation is something to monitor because the Bills' defensive interior is coming off maybe one of their best games of the season. So Frank Ragnow doesn't go. That's a green light for guys like Ed Oliver, Jordan Phillips, Daquan Jones. I do think Ragnow will probably go, but the Lions have kind of kept it going, right? They've had a lot of injuries this year, and like somehow they've kind of kept the ship afloat, and they've managed to navigate through it. And so, like, for the Lions, it's hard to kind of really make out what their true potential is because they've really had injuries throughout the entire season. So for me, I think the Bills just have to approach it as that, right? Is like, look, we know this team may not be 100%, but we know that we've seen this team in spurts throughout the year put up really nice games. So I think for me, it's hard to get a feel because like each week it seems like it's a different mix of guys that are out for the Lions. But for me, I would say the two big ones to watch would be Ragnow. Obviously, if he doesn't play, that's huge. And Chark for me is probably an underrated guy that really, I mean, he could end up being like the respect you player. He won't be, but he's a guy that I think is under the radar that the Bills need to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at it too, especially on the interior of the offensive line, that's what sort of intrigues me the most in terms of like what the Bills can attack. Jonah Jackson being out, it's probably going to be like Logan Stenberg at left guard, and it's probably going to be Dan Skipper again at right guard for the Detroit Lions. And looking up Skipper stats, Skipper played last week in replace of Evan Brown at right guard. Last week against the Giants, Dan Skipper allowed 5 pressures, 3 quarterback hurries, and 2 quarterback hits. So if he's forced to play again, which it looks like he will, that is something the Buffalo Bills are going to need to take advantage of with guys like Ed Oliver and Jordan Phillips and Tim Settle and Daquan Jones. Take advantage of the fact that the Lions are likely to be without their 2 starting guards, and their depth is not great either. I mean, it's Matt Nelson at tackle. It's Obina Eze on the practice squad that they might have to call up, and it's Coyote Awasika, former UB Bull guy I interviewed last year. When we were with Fanatics in the pre-draft process, but he ended up being a UDFA. So, and he's bounced around between the Eagles and the Lions and a couple of other teams. So the depth ain't great if they have guys who go down as well. Cause a guy like Ragnow will be playing with an injury, and there's no clear cut like backup center with Evan Brown, who's the backup center on the depth chart, likely not going to play. So there's going to be some shuffling that might have to go, on that Detroit Lions offensive line. The Bills definitely need to take advantage of that. All right, before we get into our next segment here, start talking about the Bills offense and what they can do to possibly take advantage of this Detroit Lions defense. This show is sponsored by Picasso's Pizza. 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. And I can tell you from experience, it's just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. Looking at this Detroit Lions defense, some of the big names that come to mind are up front on the defensive line. 2nd overall pick, should have been 1st overall pick, Aiden Hutchinson, and your guy, Aleem McNeil, out of MC State a couple years ago. He's been really coming on for them along the defensive line. And then they are really beat up in the secondary. Like I said, Akuda is out. So, your REA from Penn State, who we loved a couple of years ago, it's going to be CB1. And it's going to be like a platoon of Mike Hughes and Jerry Jacobs at CB2. Will Harris, who's really more of a safety, working the nickel. And they got some solid safeties in Deshaun Elliott and Kirby Joseph, the rookie, along with Malcolm Rodriguez and Alex Anzalone working the linebacker position. But just looking at this Lions defensive tendencies per Sports Information Solutions, there's a lot of interesting things here because it appears like the Lions are pretty set in some of their tendencies. 7-man box, 38% usage. That's 4th in the NFL where they have 7 guys in the box. Light box, 37%. 30th in the league where they carry a light box. Stacked box, 25%. That's 8th in the NFL. So they like to bring a lot of guys up towards the line of scrimmage. 1 high shell, 54%. That's 8th in the league. 2 high shell, the defense that a lot of teams mostly run against the Buffalo Bills to counteract Josh Allen, that 2 deep safety look, only 37% for the Lions. That's 28th in the NFL. They play man-to-man defense 35% of the time, which is the 8th highest rate in the NFL. And they blitz 33% of the time, which is the 6th highest rate in the NFL. Light boxes, 2 high shells, man-to-man no 2 high shells, man-to-man defense, high blitz rate. When I see these things, 2 things come to mind. Josh Allen versus the blitz, and Isaiah McKenzie. Because all 3 of those things are highly successful when you stack the box, you only put 1 safety high, and you play man-to-man defense, and you blitz the Buffalo Bills. Do the Lions leave tendency, or do they play into what they believe is their strengths? And do we see Josh Allen and guys like Isaiah McKenzie cook?
Well, I don't think the Lions are going to break tendency, and I say that because it's a tendency, and it's been, 11 games so far, so it would be kind of out of character. And secondly, the Lions are looking at Josh Allen the last few games, and I know he's efficient against the Browns, but
Mhm.
he's still working his way back, probably a little bit mentally, from some of those turnovers from prior games. So if I'm the Lions, I don't break tendency. I try to take my chances and maybe do what I do best and hope that Josh Allen, maybe reverts and makes some mental mistakes against the
Mhm.
blitz, right? And I think that, there is two sides to that coin. Obviously, you're playing with a little bit of fire because Josh Allen's historically been very good against the blitz and really good against man coverage. Same for Isaiah McKenzie, like you mentioned, but there's still a little bit of work to be done on his part to kind of get back that confidence, I think, and get back to where we felt like there was just no
Mhm.
stopping him against that style of defense. Um, and you mentioned the Lions running 7 guys in the box a lot, which was a high rate as well. Um, Similar to the Browns in that sense. So again, another opportunity
Mhm.
potentially for the Bills to show off a little bit of that running game against that 7-man box like they did last week against the Browns.
Mhm.
But to answer your question, it's not impossible, but I would be surprised if the
Yeah.
Lions broke tendency.
Yeah, looking at the Lions' defensive DVOA, they're 25th overall. They're 23rd versus the pass, and they're 27th versus the run. So, what do you think the Buffalo Bills' game plan is going to be to sort of attack this? Like I said, 23rd versus the pass, and now you got no Jeffrey Okuda. 27th versus the run, and now you've got no Pascal, and you've also got no. I'm already forgetting the name of their other defensive end; it's slipping my mind. And you've already got no Charles Harris as well. So they're reeling at both levels of the defense, and they're already 27th versus the run. How do you think the Buffalo Bills game plan against the Detroit Lions this week, especially on a short week too?
I think it's going to be very similar to the Browns game plan,
Mhm.
personally. And you look at some of these statistics, and you mentioned the DVOA. Um, Lions are dead last in raw statistics as far as yards per game allowed, bottom 5 in both the pass and run D, 28.2 points allowed per game, worst in the NFL. This I thought was interesting, and this is why I think the game plan could be similar to what the Bills did
Mhm.
against the Browns, where they kind of went run heavy, especially in the second half. The Lions are in defensive DVOA split by halves, are 15th in defensive DVOA in first halves of games, but they're 31st defensive DVOA in second halves of games. So if the Bills kind of come out with a similar game plan to what they did against Cleveland, and now
Mhm.
you like to see them get off to a little bit of a faster start,
Yeah,
but an efficient game plan from Josh Allen and Ken Dorsey, moving the chains, running the ball,
stacking
giving your
points.
stacking points. If you get to the second half, this Lions team crumbles defensively in the second halves of
Mhm.
games. So you couple that with what you mentioned in the bad run defense and just their overall bad defense, just raw statistics. The game plan could be very similar
Mhm.
where you try to stack points in the first half, and in the second half, this team crumbles defensively. You can just essentially shut the door on them. And by the way, also, an interesting DVOA measure they have is what they call late and close, which by their definition is second half in games where the score is within 8 points or less. They're 25th. So even if the Bills do kind of go out with the game plan of being a little
Mhm.
bit more conservative and efficient, even in games where it's within 8 points in the second half, the Lions are not good,
Mhm.
have proven to be not good defensively per DVOA. So I like the Bills to come out with a similar game plan like they did against the Browns. Now, you could see a slight uptick maybe in some of the shots they take. I'm not going to
Mhm.
say it's going to be like under 200 yards passing for Josh Allen, but I do think you will see a little bit more of a balanced offense than maybe we've seen for the better part of the first part of this season from the Bills.
Yeah, I mean, the Buffalo Bills need to continue to, I think, get through these couple of short weeks and maybe rely on the running game more than they typically would. 27th versus the run in DVOA. So I think it's important to keep the pressure on them and
Hmm.
keep the offense stable, utilizing the run game. Singletary and Cook both ran for 86 yards apiece last week. Motor had 66 yards after contact. He forced 6 missed tackles and he had 4 10 plus yard runs. Cook, 28 yards after contact, 1 forced missed tackle, and 3 10-plus yard runs. Our linemen or our running backs, they really ran the ball hard, especially in the second half against the Browns. I would like to see that continue against the Lions, but while you're being smart and, checking the ball down to Dawson Knox and running the ball with James Cook and Devin Singletary, as you mentioned, I would like to see the Buffalo Bills take some shots down the football field. Maybe not be aggressive as you normally would if you were fully healthy. Josh
Right.
Allen was fully confident and you had a full week of practice. If all three of those things were true, I think the Buffalo Bills would come out with like the Pittsburgh Steelers game plan. It would be chucking the ball, and the average depth of target would be like 20 yards on every throw because that's how bad the secondary is. So I
Yeah.
want to see some of those Gabriel Davis and some of those Stephon Diggs option routes over the deep middle of the field, especially if they're going to be running that one high shell a ton like they do. I mean, the Giants absolutely peppered. I'm stealing one of your words here. The secondary of the Lions and the secondary, like the secondary players in the secondary, CB2 nickel, right? Will Harris, their nickel corner, who I said is really more of a safety, was targeted 10 times by the Giants. 10. 9 completions, 89 yards, 7 yards average depth of target on those completions. Mike Hughes at left cornerback after Aurier moved over to take over Okuda's spot on the right side was targeted 3 times, 2 completions for 43 yards. 21 and a half yards after the catch, 13.7 average depth of target on those completions. And then Jerry Jacobs, who became sort of CB2 and played a majority of the game at CB2, was targeted 7 times, 5 completions, 80 yards, 13 yards after the catch with a 15.1 average depth of target. So like literally anyone not named
And that's
Aurier
Daniel
over
Jones
there.
throwing the ball too.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind.
Anyone that's not their pseudo CB1 in Aurier, who moved over from CB2, was literally smoked. 9 of 10, 5 of 7, 2 of 3. I mean, absolutely incredible the way they worked these DBs for the Lions. You'd expect Josh Allen to do the same. Now, again, short week. They're also bad at stopping the run. The Buffalo Bills might not want to do too much and put the ball in danger too much, but you still should be taking more shots than you did last week against the Cleveland Browns when you're just pretty much trying to get your quarterback's head right, in my opinion.
And I think that's key, right? Is it's just got to be a little bit more calculated because
Mm-hmm.
you don't want you want that confidence to be back fully going into that stretch of AFC East games, right? You don't want there to be a
Mm-hmm.
question mark of maybe there's still a little bit of a confidence issue, what have you, going into that stretch of games. You want to again use this as an opportunity to maybe take a few more shots, but be more calculated about it than, like you said, we were maybe earlier in the year against like teams like the
Mm-hmm.
Steelers, where it was just like, look, we're gonna throw the ball a ton and like it's not gonna be maybe not gonna be super efficient, but we're gonna hit our chunk plays. Like just be a little bit more calculated with it. Kind of more akin to what we saw how Josh Allen was playing at the end of last season
Mm-hmm.
and a lot in 2020, right? And so that's kind of what I'm looking for. So that's why I said I think the game plan can be similar to what you did against the Browns with
Mm-hmm.
like a few more, shots in there, I think is what this team really needs to kind of get that momentum going into that stretch of AFC
Mm-hmm.
East games.
I got a couple of matchups that really all Bills fans should be keeping their eye on. Number one is Aiden Hutchinson having a really solid rookie year. He only had 3 pressures last week, but he did have an interception to go along with those
Yeah,
3
that was
pressures
nice.
last week. So it was a little bit of a quieter game for Hutchinson last week, but he's traditionally lines up as their right end, which typically lines up across the left tackle, which for the Buffalo Bills is Deion Dawkins. The Detroit Lions are down a bunch of defensive linemen, as we have mentioned a ton on this show. It's John Kaminsky likely going to be starting at left end for them. Not really much of a pass rush threat. Spencer Brown, the Bills' right tackle, last week allowed 4 pressures, 3 hurries, and a quarterback hit. Do you think we could possibly see Aiden Hutchinson moving from right end to left end to try to get him matched up on a guy like Spencer Brown?
I would. I would if I was the Lions. Like, I mean, you got to pull out all the stops, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, that Spencer Brown has been struggling. Like, Aiden Hutchinson is a good enough player that you can move him. I don't have the PFF splits up right now as to like if he's played a ton over on that side this year. I
Mm-hmm.
can look it up really quick, but I would, right? I would if you were the Lions. You got to play with as depleted as your right, as depleted as your defense is injury wise, like you still have a stud there in Hutchinson. So why not try to put him in a position where you can isolate him and a really positive matchup? I'm going to look at his snaps by position right now. So let's see what we've got. He's lined up, looks like 234 snaps on the left end, true left end position, another 80 at left, what they're calling left outside linebacker, 183 on the right side. So yeah,
Okay.
you're
So
right.
yeah,
I
he
mean,
just switched back and forth.
switch back and forth quite a bit. So
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised to see it.
Yeah, my guess is you will see him then lined up against Spencer Brown a ton as opposed to Deion Dawkins. The second matchup I wanted to highlight here, especially with Mitch Morse possibly not playing, and even if he does, if Mitch Morse plays, Mitch Morse still struggles with bigger defensive tackles, those nose guard types, gets pushed back a lot. And Aleem McNeil, one of the guys that we loved in the pre-draft process, you specifically, your NC State guy, versus the Giants last week. This was Aleem McNeil's stat line versus the Giants last week. 10 pressures, 1 sack, 2 quarterback hits, 7 quarterback hurries, 31% pass rush win rate. Aleem McNeil was an absolute monster against the New York Giants. We have seen defensive tackles completely pulverize the Buffalo Bills game plan before, whether it's Chris Jones or whether it's Cam Hayward. We have seen these bigger defensive tackles, Jeffrey Simmons, give the Buffalo Bills fits. They've done a better job this year. Aaron Donald, Jeffrey Simmons, etc. But a guy like Aleem McNeil is going to be a problem for the Buffalo Bills, especially with possibly Mitch Morse not playing along that interior.
Yeah, he will be a problem. Had that great game against the Giants. He's the 33rd ranked defensive tackle overall for PFF this year, and coming off what looks to be his best rated game of the season as well. He's graded better as a pass rusher than a run stopper, which it should not be a surprise to those who followed him in college. Yep, he's a super athletic guy for his size. And look, the key to this Lions defense for this game is going to be McNeil and Hutchinson, especially if Mitch Morse is out. Like, you get Aleem McNeil matched up against Bates at center, or God forbid it's Van Roten at center, and then you have Hutchinson lining up against Spencer Brown. Like, that's 2 studs right there for the Lions that can cause a lot of problems. And the fact of the matter is like those 2 guys can actually greatly influence possible outcomes of this game if the Bills allow them to create negative plays. And Josh, if he gets turnover prone, or if like there's a big play like a fumble like we had against the Miami Dolphins deep in our own zone, like you never know what can happen in a game like this. So those are the 2 probably most important guys, honestly, on the field that you got to watch out for if you're the Bills. I firmly believe that.
And then the last matchup to watch here, it's Dawson Knox and the running backs versus Rodrigo. Malcolm Rodriguez, the Hard Knocks star, also the star of the Air Raid Hour offseason during draft season as well. But he's been dealing with an injury last week. And last week, Malcolm Rodriguez targeted 5 times in the passing game, allowed 4 catches for 52 yards. 41 of them were yards after the catch. And it was only a 3-yard average depth of target. So people were dumping the ball off, and players were making plays and getting past Malcolm Rodriguez for yards after the catch. So whether it's Dawson Knox or James Cook or Naheem Hines or Devin Singletary, if Malcolm Rodriguez, who's been a full participant in both days of practice, is still struggling with that injury and not playing up to his usual level, Derek Barnes had to come in and sub him out during that game last week against the Lions, then that's something the Buffalo Bills can exploit, as much as it pains me to say it, because I love me some Malcolm Rodriguez.
And this is where the position, like I've been comparing a lot to the Brown. Like this is an opposite, right? Like JOK, one of the best coverage linebackers in the league. The Lions linebackers are not good in pass coverage. Both of their guys, Barnes and Rodrigo, are below the top 50 coverage grade linebackers in per PFF. And you mentioned the stats against Rodrigo last week. This is a very vulnerable area for the Lions defense. And for those of you who watch Hard Knocks, where were you seeing most of those fun kind of good plays happen for Rodrigo was coming up and making thumps in the run game, right? It wasn't really in coverage where he is a bit susceptible. He's definitely more of a thumper than he is a coverage backer, and Barnes, a little bit of the same. So this is certainly an area of weakness for the Lions. And if the Bills, hey, if they want to neutralize a little bit of that, maybe that pass rush up the middle from McNeil, and that rush on the edge from Hutchinson, if he's on Spencer Brown, you can take advantage of the short passing game with Knox and guys like McKenzie over the middle, because these coverage or these linebackers for the Lions are not very good in coverage.
Switching our focus now from the Bills offense to the Bills defense, going up against the Detroit Lions offense. Looking at this offense, they're going to have active receivers in DJ Chark and unlikely Josh Reynolds, but they're going to be limited. They've got a really banged up offensive line. Jared Goff is a serviceable but not very mobile quarterback who can get very streaky at times. They traded TJ Hawkinson. Thank God they got Brock Wright at tight end. They do have some studs. Amon-Ra St. Brown is an absolute stud. We're going to get into him. We're going to talk about him a little bit more in a second. Jamal Williams has been running the ball with just an insane amount of
12
physicality.
touchdowns. He has 12 rushing touchdowns. Insane.
His physicality and the Bills' tackling woes, it's the things will be tested. Rubber will meet the road today. And then to a degree, DeAndre Swift, but he's been dealing with shoulder and ankle injuries, and they've really been limiting his snap count. Justin Jackson, I think, outsnapped him last week. And Justin Jackson had a pretty good game last week, too, against the New York Giants. So how do you defend this Lions offense that really, they put up some points this year?
Yeah, they put up some points, 6th overall in the NFL in yards per game and raw statistics, 11th in passing, 10th in rushing. So they're a pretty balanced offense. And then if you look at the advanced analytics from a DVOA perspective, it kind of lines up with the raw statistics, right? 13th in passing DVOA, 7th in rushing DVOA. They're 8th in points per game in the NFL, 25 points per game. They're an aggressive team. They've gone for it on 4th down 23 times this year, which is tied for the second most in the NFL. And Jared Goff is the number 8 DVOA quarterback in the NFL. So they have the ability to put up points. And we saw it more so, as I would say, earlier in the year until about last week when they kind of exploded against the Giants. But to me, it comes down to 3 guys, and it's really Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. You can throw DJ Chark into that mix. You mentioned Jared Goff not being a super mobile quarterback. He's only been sacked 15 times this year, if you can believe it.
Gets
the ball out quick, and that's going to be the key, I think. I think the Bills are going to be able to play a little bit more aggressively, maybe a little press man, man action with Elam back. I think it lines up well for that. They're going to be throwing a lot of passes at or near the line of scrimmage to Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think you're going to see a ton of that from the Lions. And if the Bills, play a little bit more press and take some of those easy passes away to Amon-Ra around the line of scrimmage, that's where I think the Bills defense can really have success, because although Goff gets it out quickly, what are going to be the other options? Hawkinson's not there anymore. So,
yeah, I mean, what you just said lines up too, because if you look at the SIS tendency report, they run mostly out of 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers, 67% of the time. The other times they're really in 12 personnel, 22% of the time. Least amount of shotgun of any team in the league. Not an RPO threat at all. 7th in the NFL in pre-snap motion, which also is probably to help Jared Goff to get guys moving back to back, put them in conflict, so they're not really concentrating on rushing the passer. And then I'm looking at Amon-Ra St. Brown. Last week he was 7 for 7 for 76 yards. Literally every time he was targeted, he caught the football. But if you look at his targets, 1 target behind the line of scrimmage, 4 of the 7 within 9 yards. So 5 of his 7 targets were before the hash marks, before the first down marker. 1 target from 10 to 19 yards and 1 target from 22 plus. He took 12 snaps out of the slot, which is unusual for them, mostly because of some of the injuries that they're dealing with. But he wasn't really targeted down the field. It was all underneath stuff, and that's where he does most of his damage, and that's where the Lions do most of their damage. But just an extremely physical football team, 3rd in the NFL in gap runs. So I feel better about it. I feel better about the pre-snap motion. I feel better about the Buffalo Bills at the line of scrimmage, the short yardage stuff. mostly because this is a comment from somebody in the comment section of our last show on Monday. I just feel safer when Matt Milano and Jordan Poyer are playing.
Mhm.
I just feel safer when those two are playing, and our defensive tackles are healthy and Von Miller is healthy. So the combination of those 7 guys makes me feel confident that they can carry the other guys, even if the middle linebacker is struggling, even if the pass rush outside of Von Miller is struggling, even if the cornerbacks are struggling. I feel like those 7 guys can really carry this defense and they can still put up a day. But Daquan Jones, he is going to be big in this game, especially setting the line. Von Miller called him the enforcer today. The Lions are a physical, hits you in the mouth, third in the NFL in gap runs type of football team. Daquan Jones and the defensive tackles are going to need to bring that physicality this week, like they did against the Browns.
Yeah, and what a nice confidence builder for that defensive line last week, where we thought, uh, Packers ran all over the Bills. We saw the Vikings have success running against the Bills. We saw the Jets have success running against the Bills. And all of a sudden, the Browns, who, are known for that two-headed rushing attack with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, with that great offensive line they have, the Bills come in and hold Nick Chubb to 19 yards on 14 carries. So, look, I'm not saying the Bills are going to, like strike lightning twice here, 2 weeks in a row, and have that kind of success against guys like Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift and Justin Jackson against that Lions running attack. But the Lions offensive line, like you mentioned, not as good as the Browns. And if Frank Ragnow's a little bit banged up, like the Bills defensive line should have a little confidence going into this game, especially after the crap they took from the 3 games prior. The crap they started taking about like, oh, well, what this defense is getting a little leaky. Like they shut it down last week. So I think timing wise, the game they had against the Browns lines up really well for them to have some confidence going into this game, but they still got to deliver on the field. Like you said, like Daquan Jones, Ed Oliver, like those guys got to show up again, like they did last week, to protect the absence of Tremaine Edmonds. And, yeah, if you put the Lions in some 3rd and long situations, I think you're going to have some really good success. As much as Jared Goff gets the ball out quickly, if you put him in the 3rd and long to where he can't get the ball out quickly, and maybe the Bills have a little bit of success getting to the quarterback, Justin Herbert, who hadn't been sacked a ton this year, the Chiefs pile up 4 or 5 sacks on him the other night, so it can be done, even though he hasn't been sacked a ton this year.
And last point here on the defense. How do you think cornerback shakes out? I believe Dane Jackson is going to be firmly entrenched as sort of the cornerback on one side, but it looks like Kyrie Elam is going to be coming back to play in this game. Trey White will probably be inactive because of the style of the turf there in Detroit. The question becomes like, does Xavier Rhodes play? Probably not with Elam back, but who knows? Xavier Rhodes looked pretty decent in the 25 or so snaps that he got in this football game. But how do you see CB2 shaking out? My prediction is just a rotation or a platoon between Benford and Elam, but what do you got?
Yeah, Elam, full practice today. I think it just depends on how cautious the Bills are going to be with him. Obviously, by the time this show airs, we'll know whether he's whether he's playing or not. But I'd like to see him back. I also think from a strategy standpoint in this game, that's something I'd like to see. Like we mentioned, with a little bit more press, and that kind of lines up to his skill set. I'd like to see him back for that reason as well. But I don't know that he's going to immediately come back in and play all the snaps. He wasn't playing all the snaps when he was healthy, so I wouldn't expect him to come in and all of a sudden just play 100% of the snaps. The beginning of the season, it was Dane Jackson, and then it was Kaiir Elam and Christian Benford rotating. So I would imagine if Elam's up for this game and he's pretty much 100%, that's likely what you're going to see.
Looking at special teams here, the Bills, obviously, Tyler Bass, Sam Martin, Reed Ferguson, Naheem Hines. The Lions, they got Michael Badgley at kicker, Jordan Fox at punter. Khalif Raymond's a pretty solid punt returner, and they got Justin Jackson returning kicks. I will say this. Short weeks can get sloppy. I trust Tyler Bass more than I trust Michael Badgley to kick a whole bunch of field goals through the upright. And I think maybe, even though Khalif Raymond has done some things in his career as a punt returner, I think I would trust, or I feel confident, the Bills have the better return man to maybe break a big return and flip field position if it does turn out to be a sloppy, close game. I trust Naheem Hines to take advantage of that more than I think I do Khalif Raymond or Justin Jackson. But I could be selling Khalif Raymond short. He's a pretty solid punt returner.
No, he's solid, but I if you're gonna make me like, you know how like I don't know
Mhm.
if you have any fantasy leagues on ESPN or on their
I
platform,
do
but
not do the ESPN.
they,
No.
they put little check marks next to your players when they have
Yeah.
like the better projection. Like I'm going down the list and like I think I'd have to put a check mark next to every Bills player of those like of all the 4 matchups. Like
Mhm.
I don't think it's like a huge advantage like on punt
Mhm.
returns. Like I do think Naheem Hines is better, but that's nothing against Khalif Raymond. Badgley's
Mhm.
a decent kicker, but he's still got a little bit of that Chargers stank on him, right? Which we know is
Yeah.
can be
Yeah.
interesting in clutch time. So he's a solid kicker. He's not the best. I kind of wish they would have
Mhm.
kept Riley Patterson, but whatever.
Yeah, it was a mistake on their part, in my opinion. But
Yeah, he's a good kicker. And punters, obviously, Sam Martin hasn't had to punt a ton, but he's actually been good, and
yeah,
Fox is
former
decent. So
Lion, so he's used to kicking that dome too.
yeah, so I do give the Bills an
Mhm.
advantage on special teams, and man, like it was what Bass's rookie year. He had that 6 field goal game against the
Yeah.
Jets, and he just kind of took off from
Mhm.
there. He hadn't had the volume of opportunities this year as
Yeah.
far as a pace that he's had in years past, but man, that put him right
If
back
if
on the
Tyler
pace.
Bass
And
was a dome kicker on a bad team, he'd be like one of the talks of the league. Like he'd be like that kicker that is like on everyone's fantasy team that they try to draft 3 or 4 rounds early. Everyone would know his name. Everyone would know the eye black story. Like if he was a good kicker on like a dome team or a fair weather team, on a bad team that kicked a ton of field goals, I think he would be a name, not as name of a kicker, as name of a player you can get as a kicker in this league. I think Tyler Bass would be that, but he's just like Sam Martin and the punters, just buried in Buffalo because they're just kicking XPs and holding
it's like
kicks.
exactly. You're like, all right, I
Mhm.
need the Bills to score 6 touchdowns so I can get 6 points from Tyler Bass in fantasy for 6 extra points.
All right, so let's get into it now. Our pregame superlatives. We'll roll through this rather quickly to try to keep this about an hour 15 for the people, so they can enjoy their turkey. I don't know what you eat on. What do we eat in the morning on Thanksgiving? What's a morning Thanksgiving meal? Bagels.
Uh, yeah, morning, maybe a little charcuterie action
Oh,
in the
look at
morning.
that. Yeah, there
Yeah, I
you
don't
go.
know.
It's an interesting
So,
one. I saw a couple of people doing the snake drafts of Thanksgiving food, and someone was ripping on the Channel 7 people because someone took like charcuterie board in the 4th round. I think it was Jeremy White
no,
from GR. They're
but
big fans of
it's
the
it's a morning item, right? Like, it's
yeah.
not gonna be part of your main
It's like
slate, but, like,
I think that's your mid-morning snack, like after breakfast, before dinner.
yeah,
You
right
don't
as,
want
like
to fill up too much. Yeah.
yeah, maybe, like, right as the first football games, right as the Bills game starting,
Mhm.
right? Maybe
Yeah, you
before
bust out the
that.
security. Yeah. See, for me, I don't have to worry about it because it's 10:30 in the morning. This game is
Yeah,
starting
that's
out here on
true.
the West Coast. So anyway, let's get into it. The pregame superlatives. Feel free in the comment section to sort of superlative amongst yourselves in the live feed. We won't be here to read off your responses this week. We'll be back next week during the pregame to do that. But first, our take me higher player of the game. Cover your ears because I did not have a chance to lower the volume on this soundbite.
Can you take me higher to a place where blind men see?
All right, Dave, who's your take me higher player of the game? A star player other than Josh Allen, who has to step up for the Bills to win.
Uh, man, this is like a smash spot, I feel like, for Gabe Davis this week.
You steal mine?
Uh, look, I almost went
Uh,
thrice. I almost went thrice as nice 3 times in a row at Oliver, but I was like, I
yeah,
can't do it. I can't do it. So, like, maybe I'll cheat. It's our show. Whatever.
yeah.
I'll do one from each side. Ed Oliver on defense, 3 times in a
Mhm.
row, picking him as the take me higher player of the
Yeah.
game. He's gonna have a big game this week and is
Mhm.
match that physicality of that Detroit Lions offensive line. And on the offensive side, Gabriel Davis is in like what I think is an absolute smash spot. If I was doing like
Mhm.
daily fantasy for the Thanksgiving slates, I'd put him in my lineup. Um, you mentioned the struggles of CB2 for the Lions. The
Mhm.
the Gabe Davis got back on track a little bit last week with a nice game. And I think that if the Bills are going to take a few more calculated shots this week, he could really be the beneficiary. So give me Gabe Davis as a splash player, take me higher player this week.
Yeah, I don't even care. I'm gonna steal it. I'm gonna steal it and use the same one as you. I'm going with Gabriel Davis as well. Somebody asked me on Twitter today, they're like, would you rather start Gabriel Davis this week or Terry McLaurin? And I was like, I don't want to jinx it. And Terry McLaurin is clearly the alpha receiver, and him and Tyler Heineke have a good thing going there. But like, I just think Gabriel Davis is in for a big week. They run 54%, one high shell, 8th most in the National Football League. I can't see the Detroit Lions leaving that tendency. Get Gabriel Davis vertical, utilize those option routes, get 2 to 3 chunk plays from Davis, who will be facing off against guys like Mike Hughes and Jerry Jacobs. And we sort of read how they were targeted and beat a ton last week against Daniel Jones and the Giants. So I'm going Gabe Davis, 3 catches, at least 3 catches, 100+ yards, and 2 touchdowns. I think he's going to get some chunk plays in this football game down the football field. I don't know if there will be a high volume, but I think he has one of those days where it's like, there's the Gabriel Davis we know and love. He only caught 3 balls, but it was for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think he's in for one of those games. So I'm going to go with Gabriel Davis as my take me higher player of the game. And then that leads us to our wild card player of the game. A surprise player who could affect the outcome of the game.
Guys, why aren't the brakes working? Because I cut the brakes! Wild card, bitches! Yeah!
So, Dave, who's your wild card player of the game?
I'm going to go with a guy we haven't really talked about a ton this year. And he had been a fan favorite, has been a fan favorite, and it probably still is, but has been a little bit of a quieter year for him, but going to be a really big game, an important game for him. And that's Taron Johnson manning that slot corner position, roaming the middle of the field, trying to take away some of that quick passing game of the Detroit Lions. We know Jared Goff gets the ball out quickly. Amon-Ra playing a bit in the slot last week against the Giants and really can play inside and out, as we know. Going to be really interested to see if the Lions do continue to line Amon-Ra up in the slot to try to get the ball out quickly. And Taron Johnson's going to be roaming and covering that. I believe he's in for, I think we'll call it a bounce back effort and maybe like a little bit of a, we're going to be talking about him after the game type effort because we really hadn't talked about him a ton this year as much as we used to.
My wild card player of the game is going to be the same exact guy I had last week. And last week he I picked him to be wild card player of the game and he rewarded me with exactly 0 targets and 0 catches in Isaiah McKenzie. But I'm literally going to double down on wide receivers here.
Double down.
And I literally tweeted out today, I'm like, I would love to see Khalil Shakir and Naheem Hines take all of Isaiah McKenzie's snaps away. And I'm dead serious about that. But then I sort of looked at some of the data. And if you look at some of the data about what the Lions' tendencies are, 35% usage of man-to-man defense, 8th in the league. Isaiah McKenzie's speed is definitely often utilized by the Buffalo Bills to beat man-to-man defenses. Blitz rate for the Detroit Lions, 33%, 6th highest in the National Football League. When Josh Allen gets blitzed, especially blitzed against man-to-man, he looks at guys like Isaiah McKenzie. Look at week 3 against the Miami Dolphins. So I'm going Isaiah McKenzie as my wild card player of the game. On top of Gabriel Davis as my taking higher player of the game.
Ooh.
Stephon Diggs, take the week off. You can just stand there. 5 to 10 catches from McKenzie for close to 100 yards. I think that he has himself a day because of the way Detroit is going to play defense against the Buffalo Bills. Of course, he's going to probably lay a goose egg again.
We both picked Gabriel Davis as a take me higher player, so he'll end up with like 2 catches for 20 yards.
Stephon Diggs will have 25 catches in this game for 310 yards and 5 touchdowns. All right, time for our Respect You player of the game and opposing players the Bills need to respect in order to win this football game.
I pure, straight hate you. But God damn it, do I respect you.
All right, who is your Respect You player of the game?
I mean, look, Aiden Hutchinson's the glamorous guy on that defense, but man, you gotta respect Aleem McNeil this week, especially with the uncertainty around Mitch Morse. Like we said, at this point would assume he's probably going to play. We'll know at this point if he is playing, but even if he is playing, he's not going to be 100%. And you mentioned we saw Bates taking the snaps in that video. Aleem McNeil wrecked the game for the Giants last week. Saquon Barkley had 22 rushing yards, I think, which was like by far his worst outing of the year. And that was from a rushing defense standpoint. We know Aleem McNeil athletic and can get after the passer as well from up the middle. So things a little dicey on the Bills' interior offensive line, that center and right side. Aleem McNeil can be a game wrecker. And of course, I got to represent the Wolfpack, NC State Wolfpack, although I am not a Dave Doran fan for the record. So give me Aleem McNeil as the respect you player of the week.
Yeah. Whether it's Aleem McNeil and Aiden Hutchinson along the defensive line, who could have some good matchups against an injured Mitch Morse or Ryan Bates, and then against Spencer Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown is, again, a player you have to respect. Two guys we didn't mention that I want to mention, Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell, two really good tackles for them. And even with Frank Ragnow and Jonah Jackson, when he plays, they have a pretty solid offensive line, but Ragnow's a little dinged up and looks like Jackson's not going to play, but Decker and Sewell, two very good tackles. Von Miller is going to have his hands full, as well as Boogie Basham, Shaq Lawson, etc. I'm going to go a little, I want to say out to left field here, because this isn't exactly a star player, but I'm going with Jamal Williams. I mean, you mentioned it, 12 touchdowns this year.
He's a stud.
He runs with just this physicality that you really don't see a lot of in running backs in the National Football League anymore. Leonard Fournette is another guy who comes to mind, just willing to lay the shoulder, lay the boom. He's not afraid of contact. You're not gonna be able to, wrap him up. You gotta have to go low on a guy like that, and you're gonna have to have perfect technique, and you're gonna want to. He brings the physicality to you, and you're gonna have to match that physicality. And if you're not, he's gonna run all over you. So a guy like Jamal Williams at the Buffalo Bills on a short week have dead legs, or they're not willing to put the work in and bring the physicality. Jamal Williams is going to take advantage of that. So he's the kind of guy who can change the game with a couple of broken tackles, picking up first downs, putting them in third and short situations. So I'm going with Jamal Williams as my respect you player of the game. I mean, it's
a great pick. That's
just
really
an awesome
great pick.
Dude.
Yeah,
and just an awesome player. I would love to have him on this football team.
He runs like every carry could be his last carry in his career. And that's that is a 100% compliment. I mean, the dude, he's great. And that's that's a great pick for a respect you player, honestly.
All right. On to our fire sale, our hottest take of the game.
Oh my God! We're having a fire sale! Oh, the burning! It burns me! Evacuate all the school children! Ah! Oh, me! This isn't a fever! Sing, Gray! Can't even see where the knob is!
All right. What is your hottest take for this football game?
He's close to breaking one. I think Nyheim Hines takes some kind of punt return to the house this week. I just think he's he's close, and you can sense it. Maybe he needs to just not wear the number 20, but I know he's going to continue wearing it. But look, no, seriously, I think he's due. The Bills are due for a special teams touchdown. I feel like I don't even know when the last time they had one is, to be honest. But they're due. Bring me back those memories of Terrence McGee returning kicks for a touchdown. Bring me back those memories of Roscoe Parrish returning punts for touchdowns. I want to see one this week. And I think Nyheim Hines, he's close. He's going to break one this week on the turf. He's used to the turf now that they played there in the last game. So, and he played well. So give me Nyheim Hines to get a special teams touchdown.
I think this might be an air raid hour first, but I'm actually going to combine two of my previous superlatives to equal my hottest take of the game, because I've already picked Gabriel Davis as my take me higher, and I've already picked Isaiah McKenzie as my wild card. So I'm going to say my hot take is just combining those two takes and saying that Davis and McKenzie combined for 8 to 12 catches, triple-digit yards, and at least 2 touchdowns. So that is going to be my hot take of the game, is just combining my wild card and my take me higher predictions. I just think that Detroit Lions secondary is not great. They're missing a ton of dudes on that defensive line. I think Josh Allen will have some time. Obviously, guys like Aiden Hutchinson, Ali McNeil, if they can exploit the injury on the interior to Mitch Morse, if they can exploit Spencer Brown, maybe that changes. But I do think Josh Allen gets some time back there. I think he gets his confidence back this week, and I think they send a ton of blitzes. I don't think he gets home, and I think Josh Allen, hits some of these guys for some big plays down the field, and Isaiah McKenzie utilizes that speed against man-to-man coverage. So I'm going to go with the combination of those two things is my hot take of the game, and then that finally brings us to the finale here, our game predictions.
We're sending you back to the future. Back to the future.
Back to the future. Back to the future. Back to the future. Back to the future.
All right, Dave, paint a picture for us. How is this game going to go this week?
I'm not going to say it goes like last week because I want the Bills to get off to a hotter start than they did offensively, and I think they will. And I do think that the Detroit Lions, although you could say Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift, not as good as a tandem as Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, I do think the Detroit Lions will have a little bit more success running the ball than the Browns did. I just think statistically it would be like almost impossible for the Bills to have a better defensive game against the run than they did against the Browns. So, but I don't think the Lions have enough firepower. The guys coming back from injury, Chark, like Amon-Ra, he's not like, I don't want to say that he's not a game breaker because he really is a special receiver, but I don't think he's the guy like a Gabe Davis who can like chunk off a play for them, 2 times a game and like really hurt you deep. So I think the Lions are missing that now. And without TJ Hawkinson, I think they're going to have to be really reliant on that run game. But I think the Bills offense against this Lions defense is just going to be too much of a tall order.
Once they get their offensive line back, they get Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams playing off of each other.
Correct.
I wish they would have kept TJ Hawkinson because, man, that O-line with Hawkinson, if they still had him, St. Brown, Williams, that would have been an easy place to
and a healthy DJ Chark mixed in.
A veteran quarterback, even Josh Reynolds. And that's even a team you could have won with if you just used all your capital this offseason to fix the defense. Which is their big problem. I don't think Aaron Glenn survives the year or the offseason. I think they'll have a new DC next year, but it should be really interesting to see because I think they're building something really good there in Detroit. I think they have a solid foundation, but I'm predicting Bills 34, Lions 25. I think the Bills move the ball well on offense. I think they continue to limit the turnovers, which is important because I think these Lions will be able to put up some points on this beaten up Buffalo Bills defense. I just don't think it'll be enough to outscore the Buffalo Bills, and ultimately the better roster will pull away in the second half. So again, my prediction is Bills 34, Lions 25. All right.
Yep, and I'll say Bills 34 is a nice number. I'll say Bills 35, no field goals. I say they score. I'll say they score 5 touchdowns. Bills 35, Lions 21. No field goals in this game.
All right. Any final thoughts before we head on out of here?
No, I think like it's been fortunate for the Bills the last 2 games that like to try to get back on track that they are going up against 2 teams that are really not great defensively. So again, Browns last week, Lions this week. Just take advantage of that if you're the Bills. It's a weird situation. The Bills have played well on Thanksgiving, as we know. I expect them to come out and play well offensively, and I think by the time you get to the second half, some of those tendencies creep up and the Lions kind of fade a bit. So just take care of business, please.
I'm with you. Ladies and gentlemen, a couple of things before we head out. Number 1, Christmas is approaching, and the best gift you can get for someone is a Cover One pass subscription, club access here at Cover One. It's the number one way you can support us. For $57 a year, you get the sexy official shirt and decal, exclusive members only content, in-depth analysis, including scheme, play, and player breakdowns, scouting reports, plus analytic analysis, access to unlimited devices, access to the Cover One community, our private Slack channel, which is always awesome, access to Cover One contributors. Guys like Eric and Anthony and Kendall are going sort of live, but private. And they have sort of these like, real intimate, small film sessions where they break things down and they explain things to people, and you can be a part of that with your Cover One Pass Club access and a whole bunch of other behind the scenes contents. The number one way you can support us here at Cover One. You can also support us by clicking that little share button at the bottom of your screen, copying and pasting the link, and sending it to anyone you think might enjoy this Cover One Air Raid Hour pregame and our postgame. And if you don't think anyone else will like it, you want to keep us all to yourself, just smash that like button, because that will help us with the algorithm as well. And we'll be back tomorrow, Friday, Black Friday, for a little, hopefully, post-game Victory Friday. Victory Friday always better than a Victory Monday at 9 p.m. So Friday, 9 p.m., that is where you will catch the Air Raid Hour post-game, as opposed to Monday, since we are playing on a Thursday. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Hopefully you didn't do too much bickering in the comment section while we weren't here to moderate it. And we will be back with you guys tomorrow at 9 p.m. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Are we having fun yet?